Hello there, and welcome to a very special Second Life book club on this Saturday. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and today on the show, again, but in full Avatar beauty, Zelda Knight, one of the co editors of a new anthology by the name of Africa Risen. This anthology is an anthology of contemporary African speculative fiction. It's written by folks either living on the African continent or in the diaspora. It's an absolutely amazing anthology of, I don't know, what is it, close to 600 pages? I think I have a stats slide somewhere. But let's first welcome our guest, Zelda. Hello, Zelda.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to be back in Second Life and not be a ghostly figure here.
Last time you were a ghost, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, it was different. It was different for sure. But I like the beautiful dress made for me much better. Hello, everyone.
And also the big throne that is
Mm-hmm.
just made for you. Oh wow. You you're completely engulfed by the wonderful dress. Oh, it looks amazing.
I'll switch it up. I want to show it off. But hey, everyone. So happy to be back.
So you edited this book together with Cherie Renee Thomas and Ogenechove Donald Ekpeki, who was on the program as well. Where is my stats slide here? Because this is just an amazing achievement. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the individual stories, but also about sort of the themes that occur or that you see reoccurring. The book has 514 pages, 32 stories from 6 continents, nothing from Antarctica, and edited by Cherie Ogenechove, Donald, and you. Now, um, how would you describe this book to someone? Or if you were a bookseller, how would you pitch it to me if I come
That's a
in?
great.
And I come in, I'm a white guy, I'm 52, right? I come in and I say, hey, I want to read some good sci-fi. What do you have? And then your goal is to sell me this book.
Well,
But I'm an
that's
old white, sorry to interrupt. I'm an old white guy, and you immediately look at me and go like, this is a guy who only reads Heinlein and Asimov. This is the double challenge.
I'll be honest, I'll probably fail because that's why I'm not a bookseller regularly. But I would say, I guess if I was describing the book and you walked in, I would say, I guess I would say two things. If you want to catch up with some of the greatest in the genre, this is the book for you. If you're looking for new voices and tired of reading the same thing, this is also the book for you.
And then I'm already a little hooked, and then I will say, well, okay, yeah, it sounds interesting. Why do we need an African sci-fi collection? Or speculative fiction rather? What is so different about it?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that besides obviously race that stands out was African speculative fiction. It's also the global perspective. Now you're obviously not an American, but being an American, I find the speculative fiction scene is very much wrapped up in whatever the big four publishers are publishing here, right? And so the need for Africa Risen is one to bridge that gap, right? So you have that diasporan and also Africans on the continent write speculative fiction that just addresses different things than what you would see from the West or from America or the West more broadly. And then also from there too is just that I'm a big advocate that reading diversely in all different facets. You have LGBT in here, you have race, religion, you have this whole spectrum. You have people mixing up genres and spitting out something that's totally new, weird, and different. And so I think Africa Risen, compared to a lot of anthologies where you kind of read, and not this is not me disparaging other editors, but sometimes you kind of read shades of the same types of stories because it's one editor and it's their lean of what they think is great fiction. But because we had 3 editors on this anthology, you get truly a full spectrum of none of these stories, while there's interesting themes that overlap, none of these stories are 100% the same. You get a new experience every time you flip the page.
And it's maybe also something, maybe a function of what's popular right now, and then you select those, or editors tend to maybe select that stuff, just like Hollywood movies are made, and they're always it's always like, I don't know.
A
Um,
sequel, a
well, now,
relaunch.
now it's really bad. Yeah, but back in the day, even with the guy with that comet coming to Earth, like what was that, Armageddon, and then the other one, they were practically the same movie. But anyway,
Oh,
I digress. But Cherie actually has a quote here. Shyla put together these wonderful slides, and she said we changed the title from Africa Rising because I remembered OG Ogunechove Donald and I having this conversation about backlash for that concept, as if Africa needed to be developed when it came to literature, and we wanted to be more hopeful and recognize all of the good pioneering that was already being done. And I mean, talk a little bit about that perception as well. I mean, I'm just right now so deep into the scene from people actually living in Africa and working there, and it's so rich and it's amazing what is produced there, and it's really difficult. Like you said, it's the big four publishers dominate the scene, and it seems to be extremely difficult to hear these voices go outside of Africa. I mean, we're not let's leave folks who live in the diaspora aside for a moment, but yeah, talk a little bit about that difficulty.
yeah. And I'm gleaning a little bit from one of the co-editors, Okeechobee, on this too. But I've seen it myself, being a publisher and editor, and kind of being in the scene for a while. You kind of have these structural boundaries, right? So I remember when we put out Domain a couple years ago. One of the big things that was kind of being debated, was something as simple as how do you write, key here, the English language, right? And so
Hmm.
there is this standardization method, usually when you publish a book, right? For example, in here, all the periods go inside the parentheses. It's different kind of things like that. And with Domain, it was this real big push, especially among African writers, to not have to conform so much of their language, so much of what they write into these in our case, Americanization once it hits the shelves here. That's even if they get picked up and published, right? The other barrier is a lot of, and I think Black people feel this generally. You'll hear a lot of editors say they couldn't really connect with the character. They couldn't really connect with the story, which is
Mm.
usually code for it's too Black, or
Yeah.
it's too not Western, and
Or even the themes. I mean, Chove is saying here about the themes. This is a quote from him. He says, "It was strong. It was really strong how people needed literature to connect with our issues, with slavery, with colonialism, with all these issues. And sci-fi fantasy," he says, "nobody wanted to hear or see these types of issues in that genre," is his sense. The kind of
yeah.
snobbery, as he calls it.
And that's another big thing. Genre snobbery. So this happens on the continent and abroad. So this is not just a Western thing, but it's this sense of looking down on sci-fi and fantasy and horror to an
Mhm.
extent, right? It's this push to publish quote unquote literary fiction. That's how you get seen on the global stage. That's how you get taken seriously. And so you got, all these things going on. And if you're African living in Africa, wanting to publish speculative fiction, you got all these things you're kind of overcoming to get your authentic voice seen and heard. And so I think one of the joys of doing these kind of collaborative works is that not only do people get exposed to people that probably are established, right? Not all these are new authors, a lot are new authors, but they've been established, they've been putting out work, but you probably haven't seen it because it's not currently on. Well, I was really excited because Africa Risen got on there, but it's not on Lucas's recommended reading list, or it
Yeah.
doesn't hit the collected best sci-fi and fantasy of the year anthology. So it gets published in these small, not really, maybe semi-pro, maybe not even paying magazines or online magazines that don't get a lot of eyes on them. And so I think it's always a great thing when anthologies go out and kind of collect all these voices, because not only does it feed more readers to these authors that are really deserving, doing great stuff, but it also just shows too, like, the book world is always moving. It's not just what Trade Pub is doing, even as I talk about a traditionally published book, but it's not just what Trade Pub is doing. It's a lot of these indies kind of keeping the torch alive until you get what I consider seminal works like Africa Risen.
That's interesting because to me it sounds like a double whammy. First of all, there is like snobbery, like the genre snobbery against sci-fi and fantasy, number one, and then it's like, oh my God, it's also from Africa, so it's like a double no. Um, you guys have tremendous success with this. People may remember a guy by the name of LeVar Burton. He changed his name legally from his previous name, Geordie LaForge. Okay, it's a bad joke. Uh, he actually had an older name from Roots as well. But LeVar Burton, of course, has the LeVar Burton Reads podcast, and he read one of the stories, which is a really cool story. All these stories are really cool, but he read the story, the Lady of the Yellow Painted Library by Toby Ogundiran. And that story involves, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's just such a cool setup. There's a guy who is selling, a traveling salesman, and he gets a call from the librarian and says, "You got to return this book." And he says, "Well, I don't know where that book is. You kind of pushed it on me." And then the librarian says, "Well, there's going to be a problem if you don't return the book." And then he leaves to the next town to sell his wares, and he looks out of the train, and there is the library, and the library is literally following him around, not the librarian, but the actual building. So that is really awesome, and LeVar Burton picked this up. It's a really, really kind of cool setup. So many cool setups. We're going to hear a little bit reading. Shyla is going to read for us. One of my favorite stories is A Night in Tunisia. Not Knight, but the knight, the fighting person in the
Like my last
armory.
name.
Exactly, yeah. But Night in Tunisia, obviously, also jazz standard, which I studied in college. Blah blah blah. An awesome story, feels a little bit like an African Forever War, the Joe Haldeman novel. Um, there is a paranormal group therapy in there. Uh, Amazing. Another story, I'm looking here at my notes, Door Crashers, which I just read yesterday. Time travel from 2067 back to 1999. The main protagonist is from Trinidad, and he's working for the super secret U.S. agency, and they're traveling in time, they're traveling to alternate realities, and he still has to deal with, spoiler alert, racism within his team. The first story, The Blue House, Dilmandilla, it opens with a fantastic story. Then there's a story with the title IRL. It's about a gamer, and the father, he has a difficult relationship with his father, and he's constantly on the gaming machine, and the father gets into trouble, and the son actually is able to rally his troops in game to help him out. Just amazing themes. Zelda, my question, what did you find the themes, how do the themes differ that were submitted and ultimately chosen? Do they differ from people who live and work in Africa, or people who grow up outside of Africa in the US or elsewhere, who have African roots? How do did you see sort of a thread of themes that reoccur, or they strongly differ?
Oh yeah. So there is a bit of both in there, right? So I'm linking right now. The article's coming out tomorrow. This blog is called Dragonfly: An Exploration of Eco-Fiction, and I think Okeechobee just put out an article about this, but I can't find it right now. But one thing that you see throughout Africa Risen is the climate theme, sci-fi, eco-fiction, whatever you want to call it, right? And Okeechobee's article is basically talking about, people keep talking about the impending climate disaster, where he's saying we are living in the climate disaster even more so because of the disparities that, just exist in our world. And so if you're interested in sci-fi, broadly, right? I'm not saying the authors themselves will identify these stories as cli-fi. Two that people really pick up all the time is, and obviously should have underlined this, Cloud Mine, Mine, by Timmy Odesso. And also, to a degree, when the Mami Wata met a demon. And then finally, one more would be Wata Works by Russell Nichols. And
Ah,
so,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, and so a lot of them kind of deal with this theme of drought and war, and people really picked up on that. And I think it's just something that's becoming more apparent in our, and I think everyone, not just Africans in the diaspora, can kind of pick up on that. I live in the state of Utah, and we're under a constant drought alert. Most of the
Yeah.
West Coast is.
Well, in
It's,
California as well for forever now. I mean, but this is
mhm,
interesting because still people can deny it, I guess, in the Western world a little bit here and there, right? But
mhm.
in Africa, there's no way of denying that this is really happening right now.
Yep, exactly, exactly. And so I think if that's your thing, look out for the article. We all kind of give a little bit about it, but that's one theme I see a lot in it. Another theme that kind of connects it all is this push and pull between the traditional and the modern. That may be traditional religions, traditional cultures, traditional what have you in the modern world. And there's a lot of that in here. March Magic by W.C. Dunlap. Rear Mirror by Nuzu Ono is one of the biggest ones that deals with burial practices, which I think are
Mhm.
very interesting.
And
Um,
then maybe a little bit a Dream of Electric Mothers as well by Wole
mhm,
Talabi, which is really, really cool. There's like this AI consciousness where the entire nation is all everybody who died is put into this AI, and this is just sort of the entire wisdom of the culture is embodied. And then sometimes people, when there's a big question, should we go to war with our neighbors, they go to
mhm,
that AI and they ask her. I mean,
yeah,
it's an incredible morphing together of traditional, I guess maybe tribal cultural rituals and modernity.
exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of stories that kind of touch on that. I was just list two more: "The Sugar Mill" by Tobias S. Buckle. If you're into Caribbean lit, with a kind of horror tinge, that one's a great one. And then "Handful Driver" by Ada Nanadi, and that one, if you're especially at least Hogan Chove said, if you're Nigerian, you'll really connect to that story. Cover buses and all types of things going on. So I would think that's the two real connective tissues. You have this sci-fi slash, just the real world kind of seeping into sci-fi fantasy. That sci-fi fantasy always kind of does that. It reflects the issues of our generation, and then you have this push and pull between traditional and modernity. But other than that, I truly do think a lot of these stories, I mean, you could read three back to back and come out feeling vastly different from all three. And that's really
Mhm.
what we were trying to do, is show a breadth and depth of African speculative fiction.
Now, here I just put this up because the book is also among the list of from NPR books we love. Um, 2022, one of the most 2022 uh, anthologies. So it's in that list. Just amazing the feedback that you're getting. Now, one of the interesting questions that Shyla, together with Monkey on our team here preparing this, the question that she had was, you guys mixing new authors with established authors. Talk a little bit about how the vibe is, because I think Shala, and I don't want to misquote her, Shala, you can comment in the chat maybe, but I recall our production meeting where she was saying, like, this could be for like established authors might say, oh, I don't want to be in an anthology with this newbie, I'm too established. And then the new people might go like, yeah, but that is cool, I want to be together with that guy. So is there like, I guess the question is there community, or is there ruthless, competitive, trashing each other till the last man standing or woman?
Well, I will
What's the
say,
vibe?
yeah, I have not gotten that vibe at all. Not a single, the big authors. This is not just me trying to make them look good. Have say anything to that degree. They've all just been very excited sharing each other's stuff. But it is a good question because a lot of anthologies, it is the cream of the crop, right? It's the people that've been publishing for years, get all the awards, they kind of get into this. So it's kind of three ways how we kind of got these really well known, established, beloved authors with these newer works. So the first way is just pure connections, right? Cherie Renee Thomas has been in the industry for decades, right? Ogun Chove and I have worked with a lot of the authors that have been in here. So we had connections. We said, hey, we're trying to put this together. They said, okay, we're down. We trust you. The second way, especially for established authors, was direct invites. So if we weren't super close to them, but we said, hey, we think you would be a great fit for this. And then the last way really was the open call and really, really reading the open call, not just going, we're having an open call and maybe two authors will fill the spot, right? We truly did have an open call, and that's how you get to 33 stories in this anthology.
Mm. Hmm. Um, going back to the theme question, is there one theme that you encountered that you were surprised that a diaspora writer would pick up?
One theme that they would pick up.
Yeah, something that you would think like, oh my God, that's actually something that I'm used to coming from people who are living on the African continent, living and breathing and are um, inside the culture and not removed from that culture.
It's a tough question. I don't think there was one story that I felt really kind of hit that, in my opinion. I think I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of people, African and diaspora, that were reaching to traditional religions, gods, and goddesses, I would say.
Hmm.
Typically, I will see, like Africans living on the continent, obviously, was more connection with mixed set. I guess a roundabout way of saying yes. I guess I did see a little bit of that, but I think more Black authors are doing that nowadays, so it kind of
I
didn't
guess the
strike
reason
me.
why I'm asking the question, I
Yeah.
have the sense not only with Africans because that's it's not my culture, but I know from my culture, even just going to the U.S., there is at a certain point in your life, and I lived in America for a very long time, there comes a sort of nostalgic longing for being back in the homeland. And
Mhm.
I'm not a writer of novels or short stories, but I could imagine that I would maybe be painting a picture of that is based on my nostalgic view if I were not maybe a reflective person. I guess it's a
Oh,
long-winded way of saying I would probably be a really bad writer because a good writer would inform him or herself of what's going on now, right? I mean, if he wanted to write about an issue, or he would acknowledge, hey, I don't live there anymore. I've been away for 40 years, or I wasn't even born there. My parents were. So what do I know? Let me write about something that I know.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I didn't really see it because a lot of the not all of them, but a lot of the African writers are now technically expats, like they're living outside of Africa. They grew up there. Some are still definitely on the continent, but in their various countries. But yeah, I would say I personally didn't get that feeling. I felt like everyone just wrote some great sci-fi and fantasy, and especially the ones that have those cultural elements. They're deeply connected to those elements, even if they're expats now, or they're maybe not totally ingratiated in that culture anymore.
There's a great story by Oyedotun Damilda Mies. Oh my God, I'm probably butchering his name. Once Upon a Time in 1967, which is also based on history. I love those stories where I'm glued to Wikipedia while I'm reading it, or shortly after. Also, I feel now that I've read this, I think magical realism, or magic realism, which is usually attributed to writers from Latin America, but also apparently, and I looked this up, there was a German version in the 1920s But I think magic realism, like you said earlier, the kind of melding of ghosts and traditional cultural practices and modernity, and just having the magic come in there. I associate now more with with Africa than I did before. I mean, I associated with, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I guess, would come to mind because we read him in school.
Mhm.
But as Cherie is saying here in the introduction, as the origin of humanity and home to the world's oldest civilizations, Africa is the origin story of storytelling. It is from its vast lands that humanity first sought to make sense of our world, the cosmos above and beyond us, the natural flora and fauna below. So it sounds like she's saying, um, even sci-fi was born there, Zelda. So it's not the golden age of sci-fi with Asimov and stuff and Heinlein. Is that true?
Yeah, I think, and that's one thing we really, yeah, in that intro is that, in again, take a historical perspective, right? Africa as a continent, as a cultural nation state unit, obviously had not been born yet, but it's really this strong statement of a lot of times, even nowadays, I kind of encounter this, which is wild to me. People have this notion of Africa as like this quote unquote dark continent, absent of history, absent of culture, absent of all these things. And when you really get down to the nitty gritty, all these people that you're holding up, their origin story is right there, right?
Yep.
It's right there in
Yep.
Africa, right? These fables, these gods, these goddesses, even monotheism to a degree, all these cultural practices, they kind of spread out and become all these unique and beautiful different cultures around the world. But the origin story is Africa. And so it's part of it is making a statement on that, and part of it is taking a shot at the genre snobbery, right?
Yep.
Sci-fi,
Yep.
fantasy, etc., are some of the first stories we told each other. We weren't sitting around in a coffee shop talking about this or that in the modern era. We were thinking about making sense of the universe, right? And so I say all that to say that I think that is such a beautiful line because it kind of has that dual purpose of this is a statement Africa has risen, but also this statement speculative fiction really has a lot to say.
Very well said. Now let's get a little flavor. And Shyla wanted to read today, and she's going to read from Maurice Broaddus, Ruler of the Rear Guard. Shyla, please come to the stage. There's your little book display, and let me set up the story here. This is a fascinating story. Really ties in with what we're talking about. There is an African American protagonist who has this urge to visit and live in the homeland, the land of her ancestors, Ghana in this case, and in the story, Ghana is very modern, and America is very crumbling. Uh, don't worry, my American listeners. This is just sci-fi. It's not really happening. Um, and it's awesome. It plays with these ideas of this romantic notion of people wanting to go home. Is it maybe naive to assume that you feel home right away, and then it also plays with tradition. So a wonderful story. Also with the notion of Pan Africa movements, really cool. Shyla, I would say, take it away. This
Yeah.
is Ruler of the Rearguard by Maurice Broaddus.
The cold stone of what remained of the ledge of a window of a slave dungeon chilled Sylvan Butcher. The previous night she'd had a nightmare, having fallen asleep in the same clothes she traveled from the United States in, and collapsed on the bed as soon as her host family showed her where it was. Only snippets of images from her nightmare remained. The leering faces, the claustrophobic swell of bodies pressing in on her, lost in a forest where trees moved to block her way. By morning, the only thing left behind was the lingering fear, which she thought she had left behind in America. The world of Ghana, however, was a dream. Endless skies dotted with patches of clouds stretched above her. The breeze was a velvet finger caressing her face, though she was happy not to have to wear her rebreather mask like she did in Indianapolis. The oxygenators covered her entire face, and she resented how it clutched to her mouth, even though she needed its protection against the hazy quality of her hometown's air. Environmental collapse had taken a toll in a lot of Western countries, but not here. The Pan African Coordination Committee host family had awoken to greet her when she first stirred from her rest before they scurried off to work, leaving her in the hands of the oldest son. "Good morning," Poblanon bowed, the sleeves of his white tunic stamped with indigo Adinkra symbols. "We're honored to have a student from the Tomei Academy with us." "The honor is all mine, believe me. Thank you for hosting me. It's very generous of you." She waved him off. The idea of people going so far out of their way for her put her on edge. She couldn't help but feel like she was imposing. "Aren't you hungry? If it's the food you don't like, we have a Burger King in the city." Though she also detected a mirthful sarcasm to his tone, he smiled enthusiastically, trying to be helpful. "And a KFC, to comfort a delicate palate that's attempting to acclimate." The words still had a bit of sting to them. Sylvan turned off her reflex to not be her full self. That ingrained way of cutting off part of who she was to make another culture comfortable. Too often that wasn't reciprocated, with that culture never giving two thoughts about her comfort. Here, she was a repatriate, returning to her ancestral home, moving forward through, not just away from, her problems. "Your English is elegant," she said. "We haven't employed our system's AI as universal translators. We're still, how do you say, old school in that way. I also speak Akan, Yoruba, and am working on Wolof. My father speaks Irube, Swahili, and enough Kikongo to do business. What about you?" "I speak American." Sylvan tapped her chin in consideration. "And Hood."
Thank you, Shiloh. That's just a wonderful reading. Big round of applause. So here is Sylvan, and she's coming to Ghana, and at least she speaks two languages, American and Hood. Hood speaks both kind of languages. Yeah, that's a great example of kind of these themes, and then later, like I said, it ties it in with the traditional um,
Hmm.
story. But I was wondering, Zelda, what is your connection to the continent? Do you have a longing like Sylvan to go there, the character in this
That's
story?
Yeah, I think that's a real question, especially for the diaspora. Like, it's a very personal question for me. And I'm trying to word this well. I'm very much the it's on in this case. I'm from Baltimore, if you ask me, kind of thing. Like, I'm very much someone that identifies and has my roots here,
Hmm.
considers my ancestors to be from here, but I think there's nothing wrong. It is a very deep and understandable longing to kind of bridge that disconnect, right? That comes with, I come from a family that was enslaved. I can go back to my great 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 grandfather, and then
Wow.
after that, I don't know. So I say all that to say, Nathaniel. So I say all that to say, while it's interesting, and my mom actually has started, being a sci-fi fantasy writer, I get too afraid of big DNA and big tech. But she actually did one of those ancestor tests, and we've
Ah, yeah.
actually started connecting with, like, we apparently have like a cousin in London. It's a lot going on. But I say all that to say, she definitely has kind of instilled in me. Funny enough, we're actually planning to go to Ghana 2025, hopefully next year, 2024. So I say all to say, I think, especially with the year of return passing about 3 years ago, I think that is awakening even in Black Americans and Black people in general, like me, that are very much like, I'm from here. I almost get offended if you would say something else. Now I'm kind of more thinking about bridging that gap and making that connection.
Hmm. But not in a sense that you need to this kind of longing where you have dreams of you living there actually and giving everything that's very interesting. You feel like you said you feel you're from Baltimore. That's
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of generational gap too. My mom is very much, we don't know yet, but she actually wants to retire in Ghana, right? So that's a
Wow.
huge
Uh-huh.
difference, right? For me, and maybe when I get older, I'll have the same longing. You get tired of America some days, so yeah, I might have the same longing. So you never really know.
But wait a minute, are you parents first generation or did they come from Ghana to live in the US? Are you
No,
kidding?
no, it's because Ghana has really kind of, in my opinion, really pushed this sense of, that the diaspora is African and should return to Africa. So
Uh-huh.
it's kind of this, you can make what you will of the push, but they've really been pushing a lot of like cultural, like coming back to
Hmm.
Ghana, seeing the country and stuff. And there's been a lot of, I would say, pretty prominent Black people going back to Africa and living in Ghana full time. So it's a very interesting kind of, if you think of in American terms, the Great Migration of going to the South to the North. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
Africans going to Africa, going back to Africa these
Yeah,
days.
that's a great comparison. And maybe it's because like in this story, it's implied. I mean, it's just a setup. It's implied that things are going to shits in America, and
Yeah,
again, pure fiction. It's not happening.
right. Not
Um,
happening. Wink,
not
wink.
happening. Can you explain to us the difference? And we had Vole here, Vole Dalabi, a while ago, and he explained it. But please explain it to the audience today. The difference, as you see it, between Afrofuturism and African futurism.
Oh, sure. So Afrofuturism, and it has a lot more prominence these days, especially with the release of Black Panther and the sequel. But Afrofuturism, right? It started. This is kind of a miscommunication. While it was coined by I always forget his name, Martin. mm, I always forget his name. You can look it up. But while it was coined by a white man, it was really him, a cultural critic, looking at what Black people were producing, Sun Ra in the music, Black authors in general, and it kind of fell under this term of Afrofuturism, which is basically you can kind of mix sci-fi and fantasy from a Black perspective with Black main characters, etc. Um, and then when you have African futurism, to my knowledge, it was coined by Nady Okorafor and
Hmm.
Mark Derry. Yeah, I always say Martin
Mark
Derry,
Derry.
and I'm
There
like,
you
that
go.
is
Yeah.
not right. Mark Derry, 1993. He coined the term cultural critic. But the Nady
He wrote a book called
Okorafor.
Black to the Future.
Yeah.
As,
So
as
it's
That's an
what?
interesting book title for a white guy to write.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So
I'm not judging. Who am I?
but yeah, there we go. But with her, however you feel, I think she raised a important point, because she raised actually she coined two terms: African futurism and African Jujuism. And basically what she said is that Afrofuturism is usually too skewed towards a diasporic perspective, A, right?
Mhm.
And B, kind of what you were pointing at, Drax, is that it's kind of this romanticized view of Africa, right? It's
Mhm.
not really talking about Africa as it is. It's talking about Africa in this abstract, because it truly is an abstract concept for most people in diaspora. And so she really said Judaism taking the, like, more fantasy and those types of traditions, but African futurism really talking about a future for Africans, where Afrofuture is really talking about a future for, however you want to divide that, Black people, the diaspora, however you want to slice that up. So I think it's an interesting split, um, but not a bad one, because you see a lot of,
Mhm.
not every African, right? So this is also the thing too. Not every Black piece of speculative fiction is Afrofuturism or African futurism. Not every African writer would dub their work either one. You know what I mean? But I do think I'm a big believer in niche down terms as much as possible till it speaks to you, right? And that way it's easier for people to seek out that type of work. So long-winded way of basically saying two different authors, culture critics coining what they're observing in the literature, and I think it's
And
pretty
they're
cool.
both basically both are valid still,
Mm-hmm.
as if I hear you correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both are very valid. And I think a lot of people kind of usually go back and forth, like, why do we have to keep, making new terms? Like I saw recently was Milton Davis. He was celebrating the 10-year anniversary of his steampunk anthology, and he got a bunch of flack back in the day because people were like, well, steampunk is inclusive. Why don't you just call it steampunk? And he's like, well, because I didn't want to. And I really wanted to write a kind of steampunk that was more Black centric. So I say all that to say I'm really excited with African writers, carving out their own niches in these genres we kind of
Yeah.
defined.
I think it's incredibly important to coin terms or to update terms or put new meaning. Well, actually, that's the main reason, as I understand it, to coin new terms,
Hmm.
rather than change the meaning of all terms, because then it's much clearer that with this
Hmm.
new term you are describing a different zeitgeist or a different period in the historical context, and then you can analyze that new term vis-a-vis the older term.
Exactly. So I think it's nothing wrong, you adapt, because you're never going to please everybody. But in my opinion, it's always better to make new terms than fight this losing war of trying to redefine something that's established.
We have another reading by popular demand because Shyla is such a great reader, and she's also a good writer, a great writer of wonderful poetry. But now Shyla will read to us from Peeling Time by Tlotlo Tsamase. And Tlotlo and I are actually developing a short film. I'm
Oh.
just gonna tease this real quick. It's gonna take some time. These things are very elaborate. They take time. I'm developing a short film with her. It might take a year or maybe longer before you guys see anything, but it's gonna be magnificent. Tlotlo is an amazing writer. In this story here, is a little bit about a little bit. It's all about, I guess, sexism in media, sexism in. Oops, my monitor wants to turn itself off unless I push a button. Wow, this is like Lost, the TV show. Sorry, I digress. Peeling Time, the deluxe edition. Tlotlo coins the term the placenta of evil in this story, and she is just brilliant to me in depicting capitalist forces extracting value, I mean, out of people, literally out of people, out of body parts. um and like I said, a lot of sexism in the arts and music, here specifically. Wonderful story. I would just say, Shyla, take it away. Tlotlo Tsamase, Peeling Time, the deluxe edition.
Yo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The corpse of her voice hangs from a murdered legacy tree, exhumed from the placenta of her being. I am a proper woman, she sings. The burning tree blazes in the dark, the floor made of dark, the ceiling made of dark. The air. There is no air. Severed organs and limbs crawl from various distances to join her abdomen. No jury. Court in the bundus. 7 men in the audience. It's a tie reduction function. We so fitted. Spotlight on this hashtag me brah campaign. Runway show. Girls slay, slay, slay. Off-screen voices chant. Cueto rises from the grave. The killer's marionette, a woman devoid of color, hobbles forward. Her dismembered limbs attached by invisible, senseless tendons are tugged as she bends and sways. We good. My hoe's got some sick moves. And when she dips forward for the Vosho dance, her head rolls to the ground. Woo, woo, beg her, gonna beg her. A choir of women march behind her, toy-eye toying as the dead body dances, becomes a viral dance challenge, sparking further outrage. A judge comes in doing the kwasa kwasa, gavel in hand, moonwalks by the choir of women. Taps one, announces, 20-year-old girl, only worth 2 years in prison. Going once, going twice. Gone to the killer brother in the back. This how we do it. Teach him a lesson. Girls slay, slay, slay. The killer brother stalks her with a machete, drags the 20-year-old off screen. Her screams a good 5 octave. Abide. Shut up. Fuck off. Bitch. Stop overreacting. Shut up. Woo. The dead victim watches, unperturbed by the klaxon of her voice flickering, spitting ash, burning, singing as it burns. I am a proper woman. I am proper black. I am proper African. This is my religion. He is my sermon. The brother, the son, the father, the grandfather, my roots tethered, burned for their lungs. I am a proper woman. My voice is my only freedom, bleached, burned, stomped, slaughtered, hacked by the day, the week, the century. A horrifying sweetness. A chyron ends the night, and the scene freezes, splices itself, extrudes itself from inside a cranium, outside the galloping brown eyes of a woman, as we dolly zoom from her face to the outside harrowing dimensions of the 4 boundary walls of a 27-inch screen.
And that's from Tlotl Tsamase, Peeling Time Deluxe Edition. Thank you, Shiloh. Wonderful reading. I mean, really crazy story. I mean, it gets crazier from there. This is just sort of like, describing the broadcast of this sort of talent show. If you kind of I'm sure you guys got it, but it's funny when I was talking with Tlotl saying, I love this story, and she says, yeah, that's a crazy story. And I was like, yeah, Tlotlo, I thought you seem like such a nice person, but this is like really about psychopaths and killing and shit. Oh my God, completely nuts. So yeah, be careful. Tlotlo just is living in America now. She might get even crazier. But it's a yeah, amazing story. Uh, One question here before we go, because Zelda also has her own thing going and publishing and everything, and we need to do a tight show today. It's absolutely wonderful, but I'm just reminding myself because I like to keep going on and on. This is a map that Shyla produced here with the red stars, where the authors are currently located and originally from. There's even one here from Russia. Actually, he lives in Russia now.
Mhm.
So these stars are all over the world. In Africa, it's just a quick question, because there is like a hole here in Central Africa, it seems to me, where there's maybe not nobody has submitted. Chad, Niger, Sudan, Mali.
Mhm.
Did you anticipate or were you surprised by certain places not submitting?
I wouldn't say I was surprised by certain places not submitting, because you see, obviously you see this far flung it's Elaine Mwezi, who's all the way in Australia. These far flung, the diaspora. But these places that you have starred on Africa are pretty much, if I open a call submissions, are the countries that submit.
Mhm.
And so it is a kind of interesting another gap where, every time I'm excited, because I haven't seen one placed out like this. Like me and Pecky, when we did Dominion, we kind of just made our own little mental note. But every time I see a new star land on the country, that's always awesome, because that's a new, culture, new country that I'm not aware of when it comes to the literary scene. But I'm not shocked that this middle is pretty empty. Um, most of Yeah, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked, because it's really, you get a lot from South Africa, you get a lot from, even though I don't think we have one here, we get a lot from Nigeria, um, we get a decent amount from Kenya, and yeah, and then pretty much it's scattershot who you're going to see from there.
Yeah. So this seems to be that this just happens to have scenes there, a writing scene. I mean, I talked with Tlotlo too, and I mean in Botswana, she says she sometimes feels also very alone. So I mean, for me, there's no
Mm-hmm.
way to evaluate. I'm assuming that it's also regionally different. Maybe in cities people congregate more. I have no idea, then it seems that these countries here in the middle, Mali, Niger, Chad, Sudan, it's just pretty much a desert there when it comes to
Yeah,
a literary scene. Maybe not only speculative fiction, maybe altogether.
yeah, and we always try to consider too. It could always be a language divide too. The places we tend to get are places where English either is an official language or a lot of people speak it, right? So that's also obviously a barrier. And then, like you
And
said
the
too,
barrier internet maybe because here
yeah,
Chove,
internet.
Shyla pulled this quote here from an interview with Chove where he says the internet was accessible a long time ago, but it wasn't accessible on the continent Nigeria until very recent. Well, he's talking about Nigeria. That's where he's from. In fact, lots of people cannot afford to be online in Nigeria. Only Nigeria he's referring to in 2022. It's a very small part of the population of people like me who are online. The elites. I think we in the Western world still have to kind of keep that in mind. That it is incredibly
Hmm.
expensive, right?
Yep.
So even just to go on, connect with you guys and submit a story and then stay in touch that way and see if the submission went through or whatnot, the infrastructure is a huge hurdle.
Hmm. Yeah, and imagine back in the day, pre when online submissions were a thing. You're talking about shipping a manuscript. That's a decent
Yeah.
amount of money. So it's a lot of, like someone just said, infrastructure can still be a huge issue.
That is really something that we need to keep in mind. My God, I want to hop on a plane, but I'm not flying. And I would just go on my own journey, running around and asking in every little town and village, "Are you a sci-fi author? Would you like me to tell your story?" Because I have no connections to the publishing industry other than I'm hosting a show in a virtual world. And they're gonna look at me like, dude, we don't even have dial-up. What are you talking about?
Right?
Yeah, that that's something that bugs me a little. I don't want to get on my hobby horse. By the way, we have horses here on the side. Maybe the camera can pan over it. You can get a horse and then ride away in the sunset later if you like. But that bugs me when Silicon Valley types talk about the future and what we're going to have, and we haven't even solved the really basic
Basic
infrastructure.
problems.
Yeah, it's all surrounding infrastructure. All these sort of plans of technology saving us all, they always assume that the infrastructure is there, which it isn't. And not only in Africa, also
Around
I
the
don't
world.
around the world. Don't have to remind folks in the US and also here in Germany, broadband is expensive, and you go a little bit of rural areas, nobody has broadband.
Yep. That's the
So
thing in the US.
Yep. So let's go to Zelda. Zelda has her own publishing outfit. I'm throwing up some slides here. Now it's very important that the audience understands how famous Zelda actually is. She is a USA Today bestseller of diverse romance. Now, it's not just romance, it's diverse romance. What is diverse romance, Zelda? What do you
You,
mean?
well, I think unfortunately you see it everywhere and anywhere in the genre scene. But basically, it's this assumption that heroines and romance are going to be white when you pick up the book. And so there is a lot of authors like me and other people, they might call it FM romance, they might call it diverse romance, where it's really just making that statement. When you click on my stuff, you'll know, you'll probably see a heroine that looks like you.
Wait, but what was the other term you just mentioned? F something?
African American.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So that's what diverse, but diverse could also mean different
Yeah,
types of. Again, we're in Second Life, so I'm always the first thing when I think,
LGBT.
yeah, or even furries or some other creatures and people like we have here, Shadow here in the front row with
Oh,
his amazing avatar. I would like to write a story about Shadow and his
oh,
hammer. Look at him. Oh,
true. I got a lashing because I do wear right werewolves, but apparently they don't count as furries. So I learned
oh
something
yeah.
new.
I will investigate with it. Oh yeah, Shadow says I'm a feline. Okay, feline. Felyne. Um, so Zelda, so you're doing this kind of stuff. It's amazing all this the stuff that you're doing. Here's a book titled Sapphire's Curse, and I think you're going to read from Sapphire's Curse. Is that right?
Um, I was actually going to read from Rogue Treasure, but that book is
Oh,
free. That book
wait,
is
Rogue
free.
Treasure. Right. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but that
Sapphire's
book is
Curse
free.
is free. Hmm.
Yeah, if you well, you know, it's always a hook. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get that book for free. So,
Please put the link in there right now. You have two links. We have a story bundle and a link to the newsletter. You get Sapphire's Curse for free. It's a Grimoire Chronicles novelette. The pitch is what could go wrong when a curious crow shifter steals a rare grimoire.
hmm
Now,
yeah, it's a fun little short story
I could think of a
novelette.
million things that could go wrong, but the book club show isn't long enough. But I want to read this and see how nothing goes wrong.
Well, you know, I think you'll enjoy it if you like a fun little shifter romp and some angels, and some world-ending consequences wrapped up in a short story. I think you'll really enjoy it. But let me get that link, and then here we go. Here's the link. It's a very long link, but you can get that in PDF. Moby's kind of retired, but EPUB too. Um, but did you
I would
want
say
me to?
folks should go to your website and then sign up to the newsletter, and then they get that, right?
Yep. Yep. So if you sign up directly, you'll get it as well, or you could go directly to that link.
I love this one. This is Seduced by the Alien Matchmaker, an Astral
Mhm,
Bride short story. Charisma Tron remembers only one thing when she awakens on an alien breeding colony.
mhm,
Hello. Upload a tracking device to the mainframe by any means possible. Xenox, a Zelhuxu berserker from the fallen Zelhux Galactic Empire, wants one thing: a mate to call his own. And
mhm.
this is just this is just awesome, Zelda. I mean, there's no limit to your imagination.
There is
How,
none, especially in Romance Landia.
how did you embark on this? I mean, was this how did you end up with loving romance so much and really, I mean, you have your foot in this. It seems to me that you're dominating that genre.
What's romance? I think it's like everyone's kind of author story. You kind of picked up a book and really fell in love with it. I used to get, my mom would give me $20, and either at the Goodwill or Barnes and Noble, I would go around try to get some books, and I picked up. I think it was it's one of Catherine Woodwhite's novels. Either her, and then on electronically when I found Alien Romance, it was who's actually pretty famous now because of TikTok, Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet Barbarians. So when it came to just romance in general, I thought I was going to be a historical romance writer. Just showing you how much you can deviate from your plans, because I was really into what they used to call bodice rippers back in the day. But then I found Ice Planet Barbarians, and I was like, I can mix my geekish love of sci-fi and fantasy with romance, and I never looked back.
Wow. Ruby Dixon, Ice Planet Barbarians. I have never heard of this. This is a whole new world for me. Oh my God.
Yeah,
So,
she's like literally printing money right now. Her books got
okay.
picked up by a trade publisher.
So she has the Barbarian's Hope here with these kind of oh, look at this guy. Okay, well, let's not get sidetracked because first I need to read the Meet Your Single Dads of Gaynor Beach, which is another series that you're working on. No, but let's read from Rogue Treasure, and this is part of the story bundle that people can get right now, right?
So for Black History Month, it's still going on for 19 more days. The Black Fantastic bundle I curated contains about 11 stories, and it has Afro and African futurism, horror, steampunk, a steampunk variation, sword and soul. You name it, it's probably in this bundle. And so I would definitely say check it out. You can pay as little as $5, and you'll get 4 books, which is a pretty great deal. And if you spend, I believe it's $15, you'll get the rest of the books. So yeah, check it out. Has some really amazing authors: Milton Davis, Nicole Givens Kurtz. My co-editor Cherie Renee Thomas is in here a couple times. So some really awesome works. But my story, Rogue Treasure, is in here. If you pay the extra money, you can get it as a bonus. And it's basically a alien romance standalone between a cyborg and pirate. He's and also his alien, lover. So I'll read a very short excerpt from it because I think we're over time, and then I guess we'll wrap up the show.
Can I ask you to stand up in front of the book stand? This is the one requirement, Zelda. I apologize. We try to accommodate our guests, authors, especially when they have such wonderful chairs. But for camera reasons, can I ask you to stand up in front of the book display here and get off
Okay.
this? It is
Oh,
hard
I
for
see
me
it.
to address the queen on the throne.
Uh, let's see if I can not have a technical difficulty at the end. And
There you go. And I will move the book display to you.
oh, okay. Doo-doo-doo.
Good,
Are we
good. No,
good?
you're good, you're good, you're good. And let's move the display. Ooh, it's a big display. And now we're gonna hear Zelda reading from Rogue Treasure.
Okay, perfect. The synthetic wind inside of my Regent prison cell smelled of stardust and blood. Metallic and thick, it stuck to my hoarse throat and burned my bruised skin. Minutes that felt like hours passed before I realized the screaming ringing in my ears was my own. Death came to Phobos draped in an imperial robe. I have to escape. I can't die like this. Not here, not now. Those 3 thoughts collided into one another and drove me to my feet. I raced towards the only exit, a crater-sized hole that used to be a door blown open by invading royalist troopers. Obed Minga, a royalist, snarled, raising his phaser mid-air. He grazed the trigger, and a deadly stream of white light flashed through the crowd. I stopped and stared in horror as my neighbor's son collapsed, a huge hole through his chest, his organs vaporized in the process. It took everything in me not to throw up everything in my stomach and faint. Instead, I turned around and I kept running. I ran and ran and ran without a destination in mind, my mindless quest for salvation guiding my frenzied movements. Minga, the guard, shouted the slur with ease, turning his weapon towards me. Without hesitation, I hurled myself through the exit and down a corridor leading to the landing bay. I felt the presence of the intruders gaining on me. All around me, chaos reigned, spacecrafts exploding silently in the vacuum of deep space. Bodies suspended in midair surrounded the glass walkway, their bodies crystallized by the extreme cold of the void, their faces a mask of perpetual fear. Fires had broken out across the mining strips, threatening to consume the lunar colony and my allies with it. Ah, I screamed in agony as a laser grazed my back, ripping open my suit. I fell forward, tripping over dead bodies, clawing my way to freedom at the end of the tunnel. I was so close, yet so far. The shackles around my hands made it impossible for me to drag my body forward properly. But I couldn't give up, not when I had a mission to carry out. Despite my will to live, my body failed me. Blood oozed from my back, joining my kin beneath me. As I faded out, there was only one thing on my mind: the man I should have never left behind, the one who warned me this day would come and he wouldn't be there to save me. I longed to see his vengeful gaze upon me, to feel the force of his rage as he dragged me towards him. I should have never left him behind. The only reason I still fought to breathe then, to live, also I could see him again. His rusted brown skin and eyes filled with venom were the last things I saw before everything went back black. Sabir, I'm sorry. And that's it.
Awesome, Zelda. You have such a punchy style, just sort of a pacing and kinetic style. It's really awesome. I'm impressed. People, please sign up to the newsletter, get that story bundle, and get also the Africa Risen. Last question: what do you like better, uh, editing, bossing other writers around, or writing?
Honestly, I'll say writing because when I'm editing, I feel bad saying no, and I feel bad when I fall behind.
Ah, so you're not the because some people say, well, I like editing because I want to be in control. I want to boss people around. Um, yeah,
It's fun. It's fun when you have you know, you're in charge until you're in charge and something goes wrong.
that's right. That's right. That's then you need to find plausible deniability with your co-editors.
Right? That's why I co-edit, so it doesn't fall all on me. Wink, wink.
My avatar is falling asleep. My avatar is me, and I'm not falling asleep. Zelda, this is absolutely amazing, awesome. We have to wrap now. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to redo it and we had a good turnout despite the unusual time. Really, really wonderful work. Thank you, Zelda. Thank you, audience. If you enjoyed this and you want to support this program, you can consider membership on the YouTube channel. You can donate here on the tip jar on the side. This is a volunteer effort. It's yeah, volunteer effort means we're not getting paid. We're doing this to bring reading, the joy of reading, push that joy of reading, that nefarious goal that we have, like drug pushers. We're pushing the good kind of drug. The Second Life Book Club was established April 8th, 2020. This is almost 3 years. The
Oh
show
wow.
is produced by myself, the camera sound by Isabel Sharon. The avatars are made by Bespoke Caravan mostly. Sometimes we have other people work on them. I think yours was made by Ruby. Research is by Shyla the Super Gecko and Monkey. Draxtor.com/SL Book Club. You will get the calendar. You can sign up for the newsletter, and the book club is usually every Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Don't miss it. We have two sponsors that help us out with a couple of Linden dollars here and there. Bespoke Caravan, makers of fantastic avatars. Bespoke is just amazing. Check out my video, Avatars Made in SL, where I profile the team. Amazing, amazing, fantastical avatars. The other sponsor is the Black Forest, low land impact, high detail board games. This is Arthur Schwartzman's company. These are sometimes variations of existing well-known board games you can see here on the slide, but he also makes his games completely from scratch sometimes. So really amazing. Next week we have a free for all, no guest, where everybody is the guest. If you want to read something or if you want to talk about a specific topic, if you're an author, please direct message me so I can put it together a little bit. It's also Black History Month, so I'm going to be talking about my favorite Black authors. And also, I'm going to be talking a little bit about one of the greatest historians, American historians, Gerald Horne. who's just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely amazing from University of Houston. And yesterday, I saw a bunch of interviews with Gerald Horne. I was like, I want to read just. I can listen to this guy all day long. I just want to read Gerald Horne, and so I'm going to be preparing a little bit about that, his various topics that are quite vast. And yeah, that's it. Again, thank you, Zelda, and thank you, audience, and good night and good day. See you all next
Thanks,
Wednesday.
everyone.